China was relatively ungoverned for hundreds of years. Many people hoped that someday somebody would unify China and create a government, but it wasn't until the Warring States period in which someone took control. His name was Qin, and he created the Qin dynasty. In comparison to other dynasties, the Qin was very short, but it would bring China together in a way that had never been done before. In an attempt to further the unification, Shang divided China into 36 administrative units. The right to rule each state was given to the emperor's own appointees. This allowed Shang to maintain order throughout the vast country without having to constantly supervise every state. In order to please the people and to improve transportation and trade, Shang began the building of roads. These roads would be expanded and improved by the later Han dynasty. Some of these roads would even become part of the famous Silk Roads network, which would stretch across their continent. The country was unified even more when writing was simplified and standardized. This improved communication in trade and education. Shang won even more support through freeing all the peasants from serfdom. Everything changed when Shang's legalist ideas began to oppose on the Confucianist lifestyle. The emperor ordered the burning of all books containing Confucianist ideas. He also raised taxes on harvests and businesses. This angered farmers and the newly freed peasants. The Confucianists were further oppressed when all the citizens were divided into 20 ranks of status in society. These ranks determined the clothes they could wear and the jobs they could have. In a final act to eliminate Confucianist ideas, Shang ordered the death of all Confucianists. Thousands of the country's intellectuals were beheaded and buried alive. As a result of Shang's policy, rebellion armies formed in every province. There were not one, but 3 assassination attempts. In desperation, Shang sent troops to search for the Fountain of Youth. Unfortunately, it was too late. Shang had aged quickly while in power and fell ill and died. Ironically, his death had nothing to do with the rebellion that had formed against him. Shang's predecessors were unable to fend off the growing rebellion army. Shang's actions had angered the citizens, who were desperate for a new government. The Qin dynasty, like all dynasties, follows the same 5 steps. This cycle is referred to as the dynastic cycle, and it can be observed in the following chart. It begins with the rise of the dynasty. This is observed when a new person rises to power and assumes the role as emperor. Peace and prosperity follows. New leaders often try to appeal to their new citizen. They may cut taxes or reduce forced labor to gain support from the people who serve them. Unfortunately, this is usually followed by corruption, weakness, and neglect. Emperors grow tired of constantly pleasing the people they serve and grow hungry for power. They make choices for their own benefits instead of the well-being of others. Rebellions form when the people are angered by their rulers' choices. They may believe that the gods no longer favor the ruler. This is referred to as the loss of mandate of heaven. These rebellions are seen in rebel armies, civil wars, and even assassinations. Last and final step is the fall of the dynasty. Rulers are usually overcome by a rebellion, and new rulers and governments often rise from the ashes. The first step in the dynastic cycle of the Qin occurred when Shang rose to power. He claimed that he held power because the gods favored him. He had the mandate of heaven. As long as the people believed that the gods wanted Shang to rule, he would remain legitimate. In order to prove to the citizens that it was the gods who had given him power, Shang had to bring peace and prosperity to the people. This is seen in the second step of the dynastic cycle, peace and prosperity. When Shang built roads, he improved transportation and trade, which pleased the people and proved that the gods had wanted Shang to rule. The dynasty took a dramatic turn when corruption followed in the next step. Shang forced his legalist ideas and suppressed anything involving Confucianism. He burned books containing their ideas and killed the Confucianist intellectuals. The next step, rebellion, forms as a result of the previous corruption. In the case of the Qin, rebellion arose in the form of assassination attempts and rebel armies. Shang lost his legitimacy, and the people believed that the gods no longer favored him as a ruler. Once a rebellion has begun in a dynasty, it is nearly impossible to prevent the last and final step, fall of the dynasty. Even if an emperor or ruler is able to suppress the rebellion temporarily, it is unlikely that a dynasty can crush a rebellion altogether. This is true in the case of the Qin. All dynasties in history have followed the same dynastic cycle, including the Han dynasty, which followed the Qin. Can you point out the steps in the dynastic cycle? After the fall of the Qin, a new family took control. The new emperor, Gaozu, was quite different from Shang. He had Confucianist ideas that, despite Shang's best efforts, had never really died out. Gaozu would begin a dynasty that would far outlast the Qin. It would rule for nearly 400 years. Although it was very prosperous for many of those years, like all dynasties, it would fall victim to the later portion of the dynastic cycle. Gaozu continued the building of roads that had been started by the Qin. These roads would stretch further than any roads previous. In addition, Gaozu reduced forced labor and lowered taxes. Peasants and business owners who had been painfully burdened by the previous dynasty rejoiced. The ban of Confucianist books was lifted, and the execution of Confucianist thinkers ceased as well. The new government also encouraged an educated bureaucracy and opened all government official positions to all able and educated men. This meant that people from the poorest families could become leaders, assuming that they were educated. The new Han government succeeded where the later Qin had failed. They were able to temporarily balance the Wu military power and win ethical civilian rule. Unfortunately, the good times brought by Gaozu ended suddenly when he died of illness. A new emperor, Wudi, came to power. Unlike Gaozu, Wudi raised the taxes that had recently been lowered. Peasants turned to rich estate holders to help them avoid Wudi's high taxes. But so few of them paid that Wudi only continued to raise them more and put unbearable pressure on the peasants. Then he implemented forced labor. He didn't care for the well-being of the nation as Gaozu had, and his high expectations only made him enemies. He also created large monopolies on salt and iron. This angered the Confucianists, who believed that monopolies were unfair and manipulative. Wudi quickly lost the mandate of heaven. The people lost faith in their once popular government. Wudi's death brought hope for better times. Unfortunately, he was followed by two child emperors. The later of the two, Wang Mang, was inexperienced and easily manipulated. Rebel armies formed and prepared to take out the useless government. Religious uprising occurred as well, creating more pressure. Wang Mang was unable to implement policies to please the rebels, and he didn't know how to solve the problems created by Wudi. When the government couldn't fend them off any longer, the rebels captured and killed the young Wang Mang. There was nobody left to defend the government, and the Han dynasty fell, just like the Qin before it. Warlords seized control of the once prospering country. The steps of the dynastic cycle for the Han are identical to the steps in the dynastic cycle for the Qin. The first step occurred when Gaozu started the government. He, like Shang, established himself as an authority through the mandate of heaven. Unlike Shang, Gaozu used Confucianist ideas that were suppressed in the previous government. Gaozu lifted the ban of Confucianist ideas and brought peace and prosperity to China. People no longer lived in fear of being tortured or killed for their ideas. Taxes and forced labor were also lowered, which pleased the people who remained loyal to Gaozu until his death. It wasn't until Wudi came to power that the third step occurred: corruption, weakness, and neglect. Wudi raised taxes and forced labor, which put unbearable pressure on the peasants. Wudi's monopolies were corrupt and did nothing to serve his people. He spent more time building his own wealth than governing his empire. Wang Mang only continued to weaken the government. He was unable to create a strong government, so people quickly came to believe that the dynasty had lost their mandate from heaven. Rebellions arose, which indicate the fourth step. Lastly, the dynasty fell. Wang Mang was unable to fight off the rebels, and his, like all, dynasties did not survive. This concludes the dynastic cycle of the Han. The steps in the dynastic cycle are not just true for China. Dynasties throughout history have followed the same 5 steps. The fall of a dynasty is nearly always followed by the rise of a new dynasty. In this way, the steps are continuous, and the cycle can carry on for hundreds of years. As you can see by the Qin and the Han, a dynastic cycle can last a few years, like the Qin, or for hundreds of years, like the Han. Either way, both dynasties have shaped the history and culture of China.
Grace? Grace! Oh, I'm sorry, are you filming?
Katie, what are you doing? You're building a road here.
Oh, a ramp! My armor is broke! Here, we gotta get this in this tape. My armor's falling apart. Hold on, I'm gonna use this tape.
But your pants will fall down.
No, I got it in the back too. Emily, bite this. You don't die at all in here. When do I die? Wait, I'm going to die. Okay.
Can we please put a blooper scene into this movie?